A Road That Goes Where We Want It by Reading in Solitude. You woke in your bed from a bad nightmare in which you entered Sayori's room only to have found her hung. You sat up and looked at the time. It was still early compared to when you usually would get up for school, but after that dream, you couldn't fall back to sleep. Did I make the right choice? You asked yourself as you thought about confessing to her the day prior. You washed up in the bathroom and got ready for the day. You picked up your toothbrush and thought. You'd not eaten yet, so there was no real need to brush your teeth if you were just going to eat in a few minutes. You could always just do it afterwards. Unless you quickly decided to brush your teeth and do something completely different today. You ran up to your room and got out of your school uniform and changed into some more casual clothing than usual, then ran to the door and took the keys to your car. You rarely drove to school as parking costs piled up, but you weren't going to school this time. You drove the short distance to Sayori's door and knocked. There was no answer. You knocked again before letting yourself in, the feelings of your dream returning to you. Quietly you entered, finding Sayori with a rope she toyed with in her hands. "Sayori!" you exclaimed. Sayori jumped as you entered her room. What are you doing here?" she asked. "I was coming to check up on you." "What are you doing with that rope?" you asked. Nothing. I needed to tie something," she said. "Sayori, please don't lie to me," you begged. I'm not," she said, tears coming to her eyes. You knelt down by her and whispered, "Sayori, don't think that I forgot all about what you said yesterday. I confessed to you, and you felt like you were a burden on me. But you're not. Do you think that this will make you feel better? Do you think this will make me feel better?" you asked her as you held the rope up. Don't say that. You know I couldn't bear to be a burden on you," she cried out, wrapping her arms around you. "And you're not, Sayori. So don't think that death is the path that you must take in this life. We can be together, from here on out," you said to her as you held her close. Sayori called you by name and asked, "Why did you come here so early?" "For 2 reasons. For one, I had a feeling that something bad might happen to you today. Call it intuition or a vision of the future. I had a dream where you used this very rope to hang yourself," you said to her, to which Sayori shrunk back, shamefully turning her head. "But secondly, I want to take you somewhere. I want to spend the day with you," you finished. "You do?" she asked. "Yes, I do. I'd like to, if I may, take you out on a date," you said to her. "But what about the school festival?" she asked. "The time in life that we have together is finite. A man can have all the riches of the world, but never enough time. The club will still be there when we return, but every day that we might have together, well, it might well be our last. So, live each day as if it is our last," you replied to her. Sayori played nervously with her hair until you took her by the hand and pulled her up. "Come on, get some stuff together and we'll have a day to ourselves." You stayed in Sayori's room as she went to gather some items to take with her. You sat upon her bed to examine the rope that she had been holding. When Sayori re-entered the room with a small backpack, you got up. "Ready?" you asked, placing a hand on her shoulder as she walked past you. Sayori nodded and you pulled her into a hug. The two of you went into your car and climbed in, placing Sayori's bag on the back seat. "Where are we going?" Sayori asked as you started the station wagon and pulled out from her driveway. Out, you replied, unsure still of where to go. You looked into the back of your wagon. There was some camping gear, sunscreen, and food. Somewhere, you continued. Let me guess. You have no idea? Replied Sayori, slightly worried and concerned. Of course I know. Have you had breakfast yet? You asked her. No, she responded. Great. Then we'll go have breakfast, you replied. To which she asked, What sort of breakfast? There's a great place just outside of town, you answered. The ride was quiet for some time until at last you pulled into the parking lot of the small town diner. The two of you walked in, to which you were greeted by the waiter at the counter. Morning. Morning. What'll it be? Asked the server. Coffee, eggs, bacon, and some toast, you replied. I'll have a sausage, an egg, and I suppose some pancakes would be nice. Please, said Sayori. Anything to drink, sweetheart? Asked the server. Oh, right, I'll have some juice. Apple juice would be fine, responded Sayori. So, you asked, what would you like to do today? I thought you had something planned out, countered Sayori. I do. It's called having you decide, you joked. I don't know. I just kind of want to lie in bed, sighed Sayori. You reached across the booth table and grabbed Sayori's hand, to which she looked up at you. You don't have to be alone. I'm here for you, you whispered. Sayori didn't say anything, but her frown lessened slightly at your warmth. Here you are, said the server as she returned with the food for each of you. When you left the diner, it was around 10. Second period would be starting under normal conditions at this time. But of course, these were no normal circumstances. You got back on the highway and continued to drive away from the town, moving into the forested mountains that shone green with the morning sun. They're beautiful, aren't they? You asked Sayori. I guess, she replied as she responded. You want to turn on the radio or play whatever music you'd like on the auxiliary? You asked. Sayori looked to the radio and shrugged. I guess so. You looked at her and smiled as an idea came into your head. You took her phone from her lap and plugged it in before checking to see if she had any music playing from beforehand. On finding there was, you hit play and smiled as some of the songs that Sayori liked came on. Sayori blushed at her taste of music being exposed, but smiled as she saw that you enjoyed the music that came on. Not bad, you smiled. This is my playlist for when I feel down, said Sayori. Oh? Well, have you got one for when you're feeling happy? You asked. Sure, but it's just to make me feel sad again, replied Sayori. You frowned but decided to turn up the music that was playing now. It was happy for the moment, but you could still tell that Sayori wasn't feeling so great. There was a turn-off to a wooded area that you figured would be a good spot to liven things up. You checked your mirror to see that nobody was behind you and pulled sharply into the turn-off, spooking Sayori. Hey, she squeaked. That was to wake you up, you replied. My heart's pounding. Don't do that again, she exclaimed with a bit of a smile. Don't? You challenged before pulling forth and driving wildly up and down the mountain roads. It was late in the afternoon when the two of you sat together on a rock and looked over the forest below you that filled the valley, which lay between the mountain you were atop of and the one across from you. Sayori's head nodded towards sleep as she sat by you, to which you wrapped an arm over her. Want to go home? You asked. Sayori nodded and whispered, Sleepy. All right, love, you replied as you carried her back to the car and sat her down inside. You started the vehicle and made your way back down the mountain road, slightly dozing off until the flashing of blue and red lights behind you woke you up fully. You pulled over and watched as the police cruiser stopped behind you, a man in a khaki uniform stepping out and approaching your vehicle. "License and registration, please?" asked the officer. "Sure," you said as you handed him the papers in your hand and your ID card. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" asked the officer as he returned the item to you. "No, sir, I don't," you replied. "I pulled you over because you're driving under the speed limit," replied the officer. "I wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Oh, yes, it's fine. It's just my passenger is asleep," you replied. "You two been drinking?" asked the officer. No, just had a long day in the park," you replied. "Are you driving home?" asked the officer. "Yeah," you replied. "You sound tired. There's a campground a few miles down the road. I can get you two a ticket to spend the night there if you need it," said the officer. "That would be nice. Thank you," you replied. The park ranger followed you and Sayori, who was still sleeping in the passenger seat, as you reached the campsite. On exiting the car, the ranger handed you a parking slip to keep in the vehicle for the night, and he bid you to a safe stay. But before he could leave, you stopped him to ask, "Have you ever felt déjà vu?" "Déjà vu?" he asked. "Yeah, like, I don't know. I had this dream where I was with this girl, and she passed away on me in the morning. And I woke up, but everything about the day felt the same up until I picked her up," you said as you motioned toward the car. "Before then, the morning felt like it had already passed." The officer looked at you for a bit before placing a hand on your shoulder and saying, "Can't say I haven't. But you go and get some rest. You sound really tired, kid." He left you and you returned to the vehicle to find Sayori waking up as you sat beside her. "Hey, how are you?" you asked Sayori as you sat down. "Fine. Just a bit tired." "Where are we?" she asked. "I decided to pull off at a campsite. I was feeling a bit tired anyway. We have some sleeping bags in the back and we can roll them out in the trunk area of the station wagon," you responded. "Okay," she replied as she stretched a bit. You rolled up the bags and laid on top of them, Sayori on one and you on the other, and the two of you pulled in close together to watch something on Sayori's phone. But you didn't really pay too much attention. Rather, you focused on her breathing, on her warmth, on her comfort, and you reflected on the day past, the journey that you had been on, and you thought about just how much it meant to you to spend your time with the one you loved. Though uneventful at times and unplanned altogether, the trip that you took on this day with Sayori was better than any other that you'd taken before.